The crystal chimed as my husband raised his glass during our anniversary dinner. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on us. The faint murmur of conversation suddenly silenced, as if an unspoken tension had descended. My gaze met his, though for a moment it seemed he was avoiding me, his eyes darting instead toward the far end of the table. There, seated with the others, was my assistant, Taylor Lee, who had been working with us for almost a year now. "I have an announcement," Ryan said, his voice steady but the words heavy with implication. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and for a second I felt a strange coldness in his presence. I had spent hours preparing for this evening, selecting my dress, meticulously styling my hair, yet nothing could have prepared me for the shock that was coming. As if on cue, Taylor glanced at him, her lips curving in a smile that was almost too wide, almost too practiced. Her eyes never left Ryan as he continued, and I could see the subtle shift in the way she stood, the proud air of someone who had been given a place of honor. "We're expecting a baby," Ryan announced, his eyes finally meeting mine, though they held none of the warmth I had grown accustomed to. The room fell utterly still. 20 colleagues, all poised with glasses in hand, stared back at us, their faces frozen in collective anticipation. A hushed silence enveloped the space, the kind that only occurs in those rare moments when the unspoken truth is too potent to be ignored. I smiled, serene and calm as ever, though inside, my mind was racing. I could hear the familiar sound of my pulse in my ears, but my face remained unchanged. I stood slowly, lifting my glass of champagne, the delicate crystal, chiming as I did. I let the moment stretch, savoring the strange sense of control that filled me as the eyes of the room shifted onto me. My gaze locked with Ryan's for a long moment, and there was something hollow in his expression that made the chill in my chest deepen. "What a coincidence, darling," I said, my voice calm and even, betraying none of the anger I felt bubbling beneath the surface. I just canceled mine. The silence that followed was palpable, as if the air had thickened, holding its breath. No one moved, no one dared. In that suspended moment, the weight of everything between us seemed to hang in the balance, our marriage, my secret, and his betrayal. He looked at me, his face pale, his lips parted as though the words he had been preparing to say had vanished. He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged, and for the first time, I could see the mask of composure crack. He started, but his voice faltered, trailing off. Before he could form any coherent words, around us, I could feel the weight of 20 pairs of eyes, all watching, waiting for what would come next. I had spent hours getting ready for this evening. 5 years of marriage to Ryan meant 5 years of standing by his side, watching him climb the corporate ladder at Spencer and Holt Investments. I had chosen the perfect dress, a soft cream silk that clung to my figure, accentuating my form while subtly hiding the small, barely noticeable bump that had formed over the last 12 weeks. My hands trembled slightly as I applied the finishing touches to my makeup. Each swipe of the lipstick felt like a personal declaration of control, a mask of calm to shield the storm brewing inside. It was supposed to be a celebration. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of building a life together. The years had gone by quickly, but I had believed in us. I had believed that we were partners, equal in every sense of the word. But now, with the announcement of Ryan's affair and his growing attachment to Taylor, it seemed everything I had built had been nothing more than an illusion. I glanced at the bathroom counter where I had left the pregnancy test that morning. The small pink plus sign still sat there, stark against the white of the porcelain, a reminder of everything that had changed in the last few weeks. I had known before the test confirmed it, before the early morning nausea, the sudden exhaustion that left me feeling drained, but still, seeing the proof made it real. I took a deep breath as I picked up my purse, readying myself to leave the sanctuary of the bathroom. Taylor's voice floated up the stairs from the hallway, calling to me. "Lily, are you ready? We're going to be late." Her tone carried the faintest edge of impatience. Ryan's voice echoed from downstairs, sharp and clipped, as it often did these days. Gone was the warmth of our early years when he would pull me close, his hands resting lightly on my waist, whispering that there was no rush, no deadlines to meet. We had all the time in the world back then. I slipped the pregnancy test into my purse, deciding I would tell him tonight, after the dinner, when we were alone. I didn't want to share this news in front of a room full of strangers, especially not after what had just been revealed. A baby was something precious, something I wanted to cherish, not announce amidst business talk and client meetings. Ryan barely looked up from his phone when I made my way down the stairs. His eyes stayed glued to the screen, his fingers tapping away, his focus entirely elsewhere. "You look nice," he said, the words slipping from his lips automatically. There was no warmth in his voice, no genuine admiration. It was a hollow compliment, the kind you give to someone you no longer truly see. I forced a smile, my heart heavy with the weight of everything unsaid between us. I couldn't remember the last time he had looked at me the way he used to, the way he did when we first met. That was before Taylor had joined the firm, before she had wormed her way into Ryan's life and into our marriage. The reminder of her presence stung like a fresh wound, a constant ache that I couldn't escape. "The reservation is for 7, I reminded him, my voice softer now. "Patricia will be there already." She had been our closest friend at the firm, but lately even she seemed to be distancing herself from me, caught between her loyalty to Ryan and the truth that was slowly coming to light. Ryan nodded absent-mindedly, his eyes not leaving the screen. "Yes, and the Huxley account. Team is meeting us there too. This dinner is important, Lily. The merger depends on it." His voice held an edge now, the sharpness that came when he thought I was being unreasonable. There was no room for personal matters when business was on the line. I didn't argue, knowing that the conversation would go nowhere. Instead, I stood in front of him, forcing a smile as he glanced up, his eyes sweeping over me, calculating. "Maybe at the diamond necklace I bought you last Christmas," he said, almost as if the material gifts he gave me could somehow make up for the absence of the affection I had once known. "This is a celebration after all," he added, his voice lacking any true sincerity. I hadn't planned on inviting anyone else to our anniversary dinner. "You invited the entire team?" I asked, surprised by the sudden shift in his priorities. "I thought we were going to celebrate. Just the 2 of us." I had imagined a quiet, intimate evening, the 2 of us reminiscing about the years we had spent together, but it seemed that was no longer possible. Business had taken over, and I had become a mere accessory to his success. "Business doesn't stop for anniversaries, Lily," he said, his tone final, as if that explanation should have been enough. I bit my tongue, the sting of his words leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. "Besides," he continued, "they're all excited to celebrate with us. 5 years is a milestone." There it was again, his constant need for validation, for the applause of his colleagues. It wasn't enough that we had built a life together. He needed everyone to see it, to congratulate him for his achievements. The restaurant we arrived at was everything Ryan had envisioned, a sleek, exclusive spot with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city's skyline. As we entered, I could see our colleagues already seated at a long table, their voices mingling with the soft hum of background music. Ryan raised his glass as we walked in, a smile on his lips as he greeted everyone, his eyes flickering over to Taylor, who sat at the far end of the table. Her smile was bright, almost too bright, and her gaze followed him, unwavering. "Here they are," Ryan said loudly, his voice carrying across the room. He guided me to my seat, his hand pressed against the small of my back, a gesture that had once felt protective, but now seemed possessive, as if I were an object he was laying claim to. I felt his fingers dig into my skin when he spotted someone across the room. He turned quickly, his gaze sharp and calculating. Following his line of sight, I saw her. Taylor. She was dressed in a tight red dress, one I had never seen before. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, but there was something about her that unsettled me, something too polished, too perfect. She stood up when we approached, smiling at Ryan with a warmth I had once reserved for him alone. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Holt," she said to me, her voice light and airy, her eyes never leaving Ryan's face. The words were polite, but the look in her eyes, almost like a challenge, was unmistakable. I couldn't help the bitterness that rose in my throat. 5 years of marriage, and now here was this woman, flaunting her place at the table as if she belonged there. Ryan smiled back at her, his hand finally leaving my back, the small distance between us somehow widening in that moment. He didn't even glance in my direction as he spoke. 5 years is impressive, he said, his tone cool, his words meant for me but directed at Taylor. I was left standing there, alone, watching as they exchanged pleasantries like I wasn't even in the room. "I wasn't expecting to see you tonight," I said, my voice steady, though the words felt foreign coming from me. Taylor's eyes flicked to me, her smile never faltering. "Oh, I couldn't miss the celebration," she replied. "Ryan insisted I come. We finalized the Huxley paperwork today, after all." Her words were sugar-coated, but there was a sharpness beneath them that I couldn't ignore. Ryan's gaze shifted toward her as she spoke, a hint of pride in his eyes. I had seen that look before, but never directed at me. I remembered the day I had hired Taylor. I had been the one to suggest that Ryan needed help. He had been overwhelmed with work, and I had pushed her resume across his desk, telling him she was bright, eager to learn, and had excellent references. I had trusted him to make the final decision. How ironic that the woman I had brought into our lives, thinking she would be a temporary help, was now the one standing beside him. Ryan nodded, clearly satisfied with her presence at the table, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. But the way he looked at her, there was something too intimate in the way his gaze lingered, too much familiarity in the way he smiled. I had been right about her, even from the beginning. She was always too eager to please, to climb the ladder. She wanted more than just a job. She wanted everything Ryan had to offer. And now, standing there, I realized just how far she was willing to go to take it. Throughout dinner, I couldn't help but watch them. The subtle glances, the inside jokes that only they shared, the way she would touch his arm when she laughed. I wasn't imagining it. I had seen it before, but this time it was different. This time I knew what it meant. 2 weeks ago, I had found the hotel receipt in Ryan's jacket pocket. The same day I had discovered I was pregnant. Life, it seemed, had a cruel sense of timing. A toast was announced, and everyone raised their glasses. "To Ryan and Emma Holt," Ryan said, his voice louder now, the words designed for all to hear. 5 years of marriage, and many more to come. I forced a smile, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. 5 years, I echoed, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. It's a beautiful milestone. The clink of glasses echoed through the room, but my mind was elsewhere. I didn't care about the celebration, about the guests, or even about the merger Ryan was so fixated on. My thoughts were with the small stack of hotel receipts that I had slipped into my purse earlier. I had no idea how I had found the strength to keep it together in that moment, but somehow I did. Ryan stood up, tapping his glass with a spoon, signaling for everyone to be quiet. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said, his voice carrying the same practiced charm he used in every business setting. "It means a lot to have our closest colleagues here to celebrate this milestone with us." He paused for a moment, looking around the table, but not at me. His eyes slid quickly over my face, moving on to the next person, as if there was something too difficult for him to address. "Tonight is about new beginnings," he continued, his voice growing stronger, his words carefully crafted for the audience. "It's about family, and I'm honored to share some wonderful news with you all." For a fleeting moment, my heart leapt in my chest. Was he going to announce my pregnancy? Was this his way of acknowledging what was happening between us despite everything? I quickly pushed the thought away, unsure of whether I even wanted him to say anything. The weight of everything I had learned in the past few weeks, the hotel receipts, the betrayal, I wasn't sure I could bear it. But in that moment, I dared to hope. Ryan turned to Taylor, his eyes never meeting mine. Taylor and I have been working closely on more than just the Huxley merger, he said, his words slipping off his tongue with ease, as if they were rehearsed. The silence at the table deepened as everyone processed his statement. Even Taylor looked surprised, but the faintest smile tugged at her lips, a knowing look passing between her and Ryan. The silence that followed was unbearable. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, my hands gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. I had known. I had known for weeks now, but hearing him say it out loud, hearing him admit it in front of everyone, was something else entirely. Patricia, who sat beside me, squeezed my hand under the table, offering silent support. She had known for a while, but there was nothing anyone could say to make this better. I could feel the weight of the entire room's gaze on me, the tension thick enough to suffocate. "Taylor is expecting a baby," Ryan continued, his voice louder now, as if relishing in the announcement. "My baby." His words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I could see the shock on the faces around the table. Taylor stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on her stomach, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. The moment she spoke, I felt the last thread of my composure snap. "I didn't expect to share this with you all so soon," she said, her voice soft, but there was an undeniable triumph in her words. "But it seems the time has come. We wanted to be upfront with everyone, especially you, Emma. You've been so supportive of our work together." Her eyes locked with mine, and I couldn't tell if her sympathy was genuine or just part of the performance. Either way, I had no interest in playing along. I took a deep breath, forcing my emotions back down. I didn't want to make a scene, not in front of all these people, but the weight of what I had just heard, the public betrayal, the calculated way Ryan and Taylor had set this up, it was all too much. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate, as I set my glass down with care, the sound of it making the room feel impossibly quiet. All eyes were now on me, and I could feel the tension shift, the anticipation of what I was going to say next hanging in the air. "Congratulations," I said, my voice steady and cold. The words came easily, though every fiber of my being wanted to scream, to throw the glass in their faces, to make them feel the pain I was carrying, but I didn't. Instead, I forced myself to smile, my lips curving with a sharpness I didn't feel. "What a beautiful coincidence," I added, my gaze never leaving Ryan's. I could see the confusion flicker in his eyes, but there was nothing left to say. I had known for weeks, but now it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. Ryan's face shifted from confusion to anger, his lips pressing into a thin line as he stood, clearly preparing for whatever storm he thought was coming. But I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. I wasn't going to play into his game anymore. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing against the stack of receipts I had taken earlier, the ones that had confirmed everything. I let them fall onto the table one by one, the sound of them hitting the surface louder than anything else in the room. "They're from the hotel," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "The ones where you and Taylor have been spending your nights. I thought you might want to see them." There was a stunned silence around the table as the receipts scattered across the table. A few faces turned away, others stared in disbelief, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I wasn't going to keep my hurt hidden behind a mask of politeness. Ryan's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for the right words, but nothing came out. I took a slow sip of my champagne, the liquid now tasting like poison in my mouth. "Seems we both have secrets, darling," I said softly, my gaze never leaving his. "But mine weren't meant to hurt you." I felt a strange calm wash over me as I spoke those words. I had done it. I had said everything I needed to say. The game was over, and I was done. The room was dead silent. The only sounds the distant hum of the restaurant and the occasional clink of glassware. I could feel the weight of every eye on me, but I kept my focus on Ryan. He looked like a man trapped in his own web, unable to escape the consequences of his actions. Taylor, standing beside him, had gone pale, her confident smile faltering as she glanced at the receipt spread out before her. I felt an almost detached sense of satisfaction watching Ryan struggle. His perfect world, built on lies and manipulation, was crumbling in front of him, and I couldn't help but savor the irony. This was the man who had built his entire life on the foundation of his career, who had always placed business above everything else, even love, even loyalty. And now, his success meant nothing. Not when it was clear what kind of person he truly was. Ryan opened his mouth again, but the words seemed to get stuck in his throat. His hands were shaking now, his earlier composure completely shattered. I watched as he took a step toward me, but something in my expression made him hesitate. He was used to controlling every situation, but this was one he couldn't dictate. "Emma, please," he started, his voice hoarse. "This isn't what it looks like. I can explain." I shook my head slowly, cutting him off before he could go further. "There's nothing to explain, Ryan. The truth is already out. You and Taylor have been having an affair for months. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything we built together." I felt my voice steady, every word a dagger, each one striking deeper than the last. I didn't need to hear his excuses. I didn't need him to apologize because I knew it wouldn't mean anything. The damage had been done. The life we had shared, the marriage I had believed in, it was all gone. I had thought I was in control, that I could hold everything together, but now I understood. I had been fooling myself. Ryan's face was a mask of frustration and desperation. He was desperate to salvage something, anything, but I couldn't afford to feel sorry for him, not anymore. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to happen this way. Please, just listen to me." "Listen to you?" I asked, my voice rising now. "What exactly do you want me to hear, Ryan? That you're sorry for sleeping with my assistant behind my back? For making a mockery of everything we've built?" The words felt like poison on my tongue, but I couldn't stop them. "I've spent 5 years standing by you, supporting you, and you repay me by lying to my face." I could see his shoulders slump as the weight of my words sank in. There was no way out for him now, and as much as I wanted to let him plead, I couldn't find it in myself to care anymore. The man I had married was no longer the person I had loved. I didn't know who he was now, but I was done trying to figure it out. I turned to Taylor, who was still standing there, frozen in place, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She looked as if she had expected me to break down, to beg for an explanation, but there would be no tears from me. Not tonight. Instead, I simply stared at her, letting the silence stretch between us. "I think you should leave, Taylor," I said finally, my voice as cold as ice. "You've already made your point. You don't need to be here anymore." Her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger, but she didn't argue. She grabbed her purse and, without another word, walked toward the door. Ryan made a futile attempt to call after her, but she didn't stop. He was left standing there, facing the reality of his own betrayal, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet triumph. The tables had turned. As Taylor disappeared out the door, the room shifted once more, the collective attention now fully on me. I stood there, not saying a word, not acknowledging anyone else in the room. Ryan was still standing, his hands balled into fists, but it was clear he had lost the upper hand. I took a deep breath, my gaze drifting over the faces of our colleagues, their expressions a mixture of shock, disbelief, and something else I couldn't quite place. They had all witnessed something monumental, something that would change everything. But none of them knew the whole story. The years of manipulation, the quiet moments when I had felt myself slipping further away from the man I thought I knew. Ryan's face twisted with frustration as he turned back to me, finally speaking again, his voice tinged with both anger and desperation. "You think this is over, don't you?" He spat, his words sharp. "You think you've won, but you haven't. You're only making things worse for yourself. You don't know what you're up against." I looked at him for a long moment, my expression neutral, though inside I felt something stir, a mixture of relief and defiance. His threats no longer held power over me. He didn't scare me anymore. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't need him. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "I think it's already over, Ryan. You just haven't accepted it yet." The chaos around me continued, but it felt like I was moving in slow motion, detached from everything. Ryan stood frozen, his face an unreadable mask, the color drained from his features as he processed my words. The silence that had followed Taylor's exit was now filled with the anxious whispers of our colleagues, the tension in the room palpable. No one knew what to do next. No one dared to break the silence. I slowly lowered myself back into my chair, my hands trembling ever so slightly as I reached for my glass. I hadn't realized how tightly I had been gripping it until I let go, but even as I tried to steady myself, I couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of calm that washed over me. In a strange way, it was liberating. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Ryan remained standing for a moment longer, his gaze darting between me and the table. He wanted to speak, to say something, anything to change the course of this evening, but I could see the frustration building behind his eyes. His ability to control the situation, to manipulate it to his advantage, was slipping through his fingers. Finally, he moved toward me, his steps hesitant. I could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface, his facade cracking, but there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of regret, of realization that the life we had built was slipping away. It was too late for apologies now, too late for any of it. "Emma?" He started again, his voice strained. "Please, just listen to me. I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." His words were the same as before, and yet they sounded hollow. I didn't need to hear them anymore. They meant nothing. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me again, not after everything that had happened. I had spent too many years believing in him, trusting him, and now, I realized, it had all been an illusion. He wasn't the man I thought he was. I met his gaze squarely, my voice steady as I replied, "You can't take it back, Ryan. You can't undo the lies, the deceit, the betrayal, and no amount of 'I'm sorry' is going to change that." His eyes flickered with something. Guilt, perhaps, but it was quickly masked by a growing sense of panic. He was losing control, and it was clear he didn't know how to handle it. "What are you going to do?" he demanded, his tone defensive. "You think you can just walk away from this? From everything we've built?" I looked at him for a long moment, my thoughts swirling. What was I going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What was next for me? The reality of the situation hadn't fully hit me until now. I was on my own. The life I had built with him, the marriage, the future I had dreamed of, it was all gone, and I couldn't pretend it wasn't. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice soft but resolute. "But I do know this. I'm not going to let you ruin me. Not anymore." For the first time, Ryan seemed to falter. His gaze dropped to the table, his hands clenched at his sides as he struggled to find words. I could see the conflict in his eyes. The man who had once been my partner, the man I had loved, was now a stranger. He wasn't the same person, and I wasn't the same woman who had stood by him all these years. The room was still buzzing with whispers, but I didn't care. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate, my heart pounding as I stepped toward the door. The weight of the evening felt almost surreal now, like I was watching it unfold from a distance. As I walked out, I could hear the distant murmur of voices behind me, but I didn't turn back. There was no need. The world was different now. Outside, the cool night air hit me, and I breathed deeply, the scent of the city mingling with the fresh night breeze. My car was parked just a few steps away, and I made my way toward it, my heels clicking on the pavement, each step echoing the finality of my decision. I climbed into the car, the engine purring to life as I pulled away from the restaurant. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Ryan or anyone else dictate the course of my life anymore. It was my turn to decide what happened next. The drive home felt surreal, almost like I was floating above it all. The headlights from passing cars flashed through the windshield, casting brief glimmers of light across the otherwise dark streets. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my fingers steady despite the storm of emotions that raged inside me. I could hear the sound of the tires on the asphalt, a constant rhythmic hum that seemed to steady my mind, as if everything else, the anger, the betrayal, the pain, could be drowned out by the sound of the road. Despite everything that had happened, I found myself strangely calm. Ryan was at the center of the storm, but I had somehow stepped out of it. His collapse, his panic, it didn't affect me the way I thought it would. If anything, it only made me feel more certain that leaving him behind was the right choice. I glanced down at the phone sitting on the passenger seat, the screen lighting up with a message from Patricia. I hesitated before picking it up, my fingers brushing over the screen as I unlocked it. Patricia, I heard what happened. Are you okay? I let out a small, bitter laugh. Are you okay? What an absurd question. I was fine, or at least I would be. I would rebuild. I had to. This moment would pass, and I would move on. I typed a quick response. Emma, I'm fine. It's over. I paused before hitting send, staring at the message for a long moment. Was it really over? I couldn't be sure. There were still so many loose ends, so many things left unsaid between us, but what I did know was this. I was done fighting for something that was already lost. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of Ryan's lies, his manipulation. The life we had built together had been a lie from the start, and I couldn't keep pretending it wasn't. The phone buzzed again as I pulled up to the gates of my house, the tall stone walls rising up on either side, casting long shadows in the dim light of the street lamps. My house, the place where Ryan and I had started our life together, where we had promised to grow old, to build a future. It felt like another lifetime now, a life that had been carefully constructed, only to fall apart when the truth came out. Patricia. I'm so sorry, Emma. I can't imagine what you must be feeling, but you're strong. You'll get through this. I stared at her words for a moment, feeling the weight of them. I had always believed in strength. I had always told myself that no matter what happened, I would endure. But the truth was, strength wasn't enough anymore. I needed more than just survival. I needed something real. I shut off the engine and sat there for a few moments, letting the quiet of the night settle around me. There were no sounds of life inside the house. Everything was still. Too still. Ryan had left earlier, and I hadn't bothered to check if he was coming back. I didn't care. It didn't matter anymore. When I stepped out of the car, I was met by the familiar sound of the security system beeping as I entered the house. The door clicked open, and I stepped inside. Everything looked the same as it always had. The shoes Ryan had left by the door, the magazines scattered on the coffee table, the photographs we had taken on vacations, framed on the mantel. It all felt wrong now. The normalcy of it all was offensive. How could everything look so untouched when everything had changed? I walked through the house, moving with purpose, as if the act of collecting my things would somehow give me the clarity I needed. I gathered my clothes, my important documents, the medications I might need, It felt like I was preparing for something, but I wasn't sure what. The house was empty without him. Even though it had always been our home, now it felt like a place that didn't belong to me anymore. My fingers brushed against the fertility vitamins I had been taking for months, the countless negative pregnancy tests I had endured, the careful charting of my cycle, the temperature tracking, all while Ryan was off creating a life with someone else. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me, but somehow I had endured. I had kept it together, thinking that this, whatever this was my reality. But now that it had all unraveled, I could see how twisted it had been. As I packed, my gaze fell on a framed photograph of Ryan and me from our honeymoon in Thailand. It was one of the few pictures where we both looked genuinely happy. Ryan's arms wrapped around me, our smiles unguarded, full of promise. I pulled it from the frame, and behind it I found what I had been looking for. The small safe we had installed when we bought the house. I knew the combination, though Ryan thought I didn't. The first few numbers came to me automatically. -8, -4, -6. The date of our first date, February 8th, 2016. The safe clicked open, and I pulled out the documents I needed. Our joint account information, the property deeds, everything I would need to make sure Ryan didn't get a single penny more than he deserved. And then I found something else. A small velvet box containing a ruby bracelet I had never seen before. The price tag was still attached. $700. It wasn't my birthday, it wasn't Christmas, it wasn't for me. I stared at it for a long moment, the weight of it sinking in. Ryan hadn't even tried to hide it. He had been so careless, so sure of his ability to deceive me, to keep everything hidden in plain sight. But I had seen through him, and now I was finally going to do something about it. My phone buzzed again as I placed the velvet box back into the safe, the screen lighting up with a message from Marcus Hendricks, one of our biggest clients. I stared at the message for a long moment, debating whether or not to answer. Despite the personal chaos that had consumed my life, my business had never stopped, and Marcus, who had always respected my work and my decisions, was someone I needed to keep in my corner, especially now. I reluctantly picked up the phone and unlocked it, reading the message from Marcus. Marcus, I heard what happened. Are you all right? I hesitated before typing a response, my fingers still shaking slightly from the intensity of the day. Emma, I'm fine, Marcus. Thanks for reaching out. I quickly added, Emma, I'm sorry I haven't been in touch. I've had some personal matters to take care of, but I'll be back at the office soon. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then set the phone down, taking a deep breath to steady my racing thoughts. I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. Part of me just wanted to get out of this house, leave everything behind, and find some semblance of peace. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Ryan had made sure of that. I moved back into the kitchen and reached for the fertility vitamins I had left on the counter, the ones I'd been taking for months. I hadn't intended to let it go this far, but now that I had everything in front of me, the receipts, the hotel bill, the evidence of Ryan's betrayal, it was clear that he had crossed a line from which there was no return. I had been trying for a child. I had been so focused on the idea of having a family with him, of making it work, that I hadn't seen what was right in front of me. He was never interested in a family, not with me, not with anyone. I walked over to the desk and pulled out the envelope containing the papers I'd found earlier, the joint account information, the deeds to our house, and the contracts for our investments. I laid them out in front of me, feeling a strange sense of power growing inside me. Ryan thought he could control everything, manipulate it to fit his desires. But I had the upper hand now. I had the documents, the proof, and the resources to make sure he didn't get a single penny more than he deserved. The weight of everything seemed to lift for a moment. In the midst of all the betrayal, there was a sense of clarity. I could move forward. I could take control of my life, my future. It was mine to shape. As I started to pack my things, the phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Helen Kingston, a friend and corporate attorney who had worked with me on numerous cases in the past. She had been a silent ally through it all, and now, more than ever, I needed her expertise. Helen, I just spoke to the board. They've moved up the emergency meeting to 4 p.m. tomorrow. They want to discuss everything that's happened. They're worried about the Huxley merger, and I'm sure they'll try to get you involved. Do you need anything from me? I stared at the message, taking in her words. The board meeting. The Huxley merger. I had almost forgotten about it in the midst of everything that had happened, but now it seemed everything had come to a head. I had to decide what to do next, and fast. I quickly typed back, Emma, I'll be there. Let's go over the details in the morning. We need to make sure we're prepared for whatever they throw at us. I set the phone down again, the weight of the situation settling over me once more. The personal betrayal, the professional challenges, it all seemed to be converging at once. I was standing at the crossroads of my life, and it wasn't just my marriage that was on the line anymore. The firm, my career, everything I had worked for, it was all in jeopardy. The house felt like a prison now, each room a reminder of what had been lost. I grabbed a few more essentials, then paused in the hallway, looking at the photo of Ryan and me from our honeymoon. We'd been so young, so in love, and now, standing here, the weight of our history felt like a heavy burden I could no longer carry. I turned away from the photo, knowing that leaving this house would be the first step in reclaiming my life. I wasn't going to let Ryan or anyone hold me back any longer. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The past was behind me now. The future, whatever it held, was mine to shape, and I was ready to take the first step. The drive to the office felt longer than usual. The streets of the city blurred past me, the usual hustle and bustle of morning traffic now feeling like a distant hum. Inside my car, the quiet was suffocating. I had always prided myself on my ability to remain calm under pressure, to keep my emotions in check, but this morning, everything felt different. My thoughts were scattered, my mind constantly drifting between the personal betrayal that still stung like an open wound and the impending battle. At work. I had barely slept the night before. I had stayed up late, organizing the documents I would need for the board meeting, going over the numbers, reviewing the messages from Marcus and Helen. The situation had escalated so quickly, and now it felt like everything I had worked for was on the line. The merger, the company, my reputation, all of it was at risk, and I had to figure out how to navigate through the storm. When I arrived at the office, I was met with a familiar yet foreign sense of purpose. The building loomed before me, its glass and steel facade reflecting the early morning light, as if everything inside was pristine and untouched. It felt like a monument to everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed, and yet the emptiness inside me only seemed to echo louder the closer I got to the entrance. I pushed through the revolving doors, the sound of my heels echoing on the marble floors. The usual buzz of activity surrounded me, employees rushing about, their voices low as they carried on with their work. But for the first time, it felt like I was walking through a different world. This wasn't the place I had once felt comfortable in. Now everything seemed like a facade, like I was merely going through the motions. I made my way to my office, where Jamie, my new assistant, was already waiting for me. She looked up from her desk as I entered, her smile polite but hesitant. I had barely gotten to know her, but her professionalism and efficiency were a welcome change from the chaos of the last few weeks. "Good morning, Ms. Holt," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Everything is ready for your meeting with the board this afternoon. I've gone over the materials you requested and have prepared the financials for the Huxley merger." I nodded, grateful for her quick work. It was the kind of efficiency I needed today. "Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it." I sat down at my desk, looking over the documents she had prepared for me. The numbers were solid. The team had been working tirelessly on the merger, and despite everything, the project was on track. It would be a huge win for the firm, and it was my job to make sure it stayed that way. But even as I focused on the financials in front of me, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that everything had changed. Ryan's betrayal had shattered something inside me, something I hadn't even realized was fragile. And now, as I prepared to face the board, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. My phone buzzed on the desk, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Helen. Helen, I've reviewed everything. The board is going to push hard for you to step down. They'll use your personal situation as leverage. You need to be ready for this. Make sure you've got everything you need to protect yourself. I read the message twice, letting the weight of it sink in. I had known it was coming. The board would try to use my personal life against me. It was a classic move in the corporate world, and Ryan would be at the center of it all, his manipulations now weaponized against me. I texted back quickly, Emma, I'll be ready. I won't let them take me down. We'll turn this around. I didn't know if it was true, but I needed to believe it. I needed to believe that I could still control my fate, that I could still protect what was mine. Jamie knocked on my door a few moments later, her face more serious than usual. Ms. Holt, the board is ready for you. They've moved the meeting up to 4 p.m., as you know. Are you prepared? I took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, I'm ready. Let's go. The boardroom was stark and cold, its polished wood table gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. The chairs around it were arranged in perfect order, each one meticulously aligned, but none of it offered any comfort. As I walked into the room, I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me. The tension was thick, suffocating, and I wondered for a brief moment if I would be able to breathe in this space where my future was about to be decided. At the far end of the table sat Walter Chin, the chairman of the board, who had been a quiet ally in the past, but I couldn't bring myself to trust him now. He greeted me with a polite smile, but I could tell that his neutrality would soon give way to the pressure of the situation. Behind him, the other board members looked more like vultures than colleagues. Some of them I knew well, men and women I had worked with for years, others less, familiar, but all of them with their own interests at stake. I took my seat at the head of the table, my hands resting on the cold surface of the table in front of me. I didn't look at Ryan. He was sitting at the far end, slouched in his chair, his usual self-assuredness gone. I knew it was only a matter of time before he would try to manipulate the situation, to make this about me, about my so-called personal issues, but I wasn't going to let him. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Walter began, clearing his throat. As you all know, this meeting was called in response to the situation that has developed between our co-founders and the implications it has for the future of the company. His gaze shifted to Ryan, but I could see that his expression was carefully controlled. He was already positioning himself for the fallout. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had worked too hard for this company, for this position, to let it slip away now. Walter continued, his voice diplomatic. Given the sensitive nature of this situation, we have asked for a full review of the facts before we make any decisions. We need to understand the impact this will have on the Huxley merger and the future of Pinnacle. My heart raced as I prepared myself for the onslaught. Ryan had already briefed them on his side of the story. He had likely painted me as the unstable wife, the emotional woman unable to separate personal life from professional responsibility. But I had a plan. I had evidence. I had everything I needed to expose him, and I wasn't going to back down. I cleared my throat and stood up, my voice steady as I addressed the room. I appreciate your time, and I understand the gravity of the situation, I said, looking directly at the board members. But I will not allow my personal life to dictate the future of this company. The Huxley merger is critical to Pinnacle's success, and I am more than capable of managing it, regardless of the circumstances that have transpired. I could see the hesitation in some of their faces. They were trying to read me, trying to figure out if I was truly in control, if I could still lead. I didn't give them the satisfaction of knowing how badly I wanted to break down, how much the weight of the past few days had drained me. Ryan shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowed. "Emma," he said, his voice tight, "this isn't just about the merger. It's about your behavior, your instability. The company can't afford a co-CEO who is clearly distracted by personal matters." The venom in his words was palpable. I could see the manipulation in his eyes, the attempt to turn the situation against me to make it look like I was the problem. I held his gaze, unflinching. "If you want to discuss instability, Ryan," I replied calmly, "perhaps you should start by explaining why I found hotel receipts for you and your assistant Taylor hidden in your jacket pocket." The room went silent. Ryan's face drained of color as the words hit their mark. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. I had never seen him this vulnerable, this exposed. It felt like a victory, though I knew I wasn't finished yet. "Emma, please," he finally managed, his voice strained. "This isn't the time or place to bring that up. We can discuss this privately." I shook my head, cutting him off. "No, Ryan. The time is now. You have made this personal, and now it's affecting the company. Your actions have consequences, and I will not allow you to manipulate the board into believing that I am the one who is unfit to lead this company. I have proof of your affair, your manipulation of company funds, and I will not hesitate to share it if you continue to threaten my position." I turned to the board members, my eyes scanning the room, making sure they understood the gravity of the situation. "The evidence is clear," I continued, "and I am prepared to take this to the authorities if necessary. But I'm asking for your support. Pinnacle's future depends on integrity, on leadership that is honest and transparent. If you want to move forward, you need to choose the path that preserves that integrity." Walter Chin looked at the other board members, his face unreadable, before turning back to me. I could see the wheels turning in his head, weighing his options, calculating the risk. After what seemed like an eternity, he nodded slowly. "We'll take a short recess," he said, signaling the end of the meeting. "We'll reconvene shortly to discuss our next steps." The break was brief, but it felt like an eternity. I sat in silence, my heart still pounding from the confrontation. Ryan remained seated across from me, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He hadn't said a word since I exposed his affair to the room. He hadn't even tried to defend himself, which told me everything I needed to know. He knew the truth was out, and there was no escaping it. The other board members had scattered, some whispering in hushed tones, others reviewing the documents I had provided. I could see them trying to process everything: his betrayal, my accusations, the delicate balance between personal and professional that was now shattered. The room was a maelstrom of quiet tension, and I was at the center of it all. I tried to steady my breath, but the tension in my chest remained. The personal hurt, the betrayal I had felt, was something I would have to confront later. But right now, I had to focus on the bigger picture. Pinnacle's future. My future. I wasn't going to let Ryan destroy everything I had worked for. Not now. Not ever. Helen's words echoed in my mind. "Make sure you've got everything you need to protect yourself." I had all the documents, the receipts, the proof of his wrongdoing, but I couldn't let myself get complacent. The board was still deciding what to do, and no matter how strong my position seemed, I had to prepare for the worst. I couldn't afford to underestimate Ryan's ability to manipulate the situation in his favor. The door to the boardroom opened, and I straightened in my seat, gathering my composure as the board members filed back in. Their expressions were mixed, some wary, others uncertain. Walter Chin, however, looked calm, his demeanor unchanged as he took his seat at the head of the table. The others followed suit, their eyes flicking between me and Ryan, their decisions weighing heavily in the air. "We've had a chance to review everything," Walter began, his voice steady but tinged with an underlying tension. "The board has discussed the situation, and it's clear that the allegations against Mr. Holt are serious. However, we must also consider the business implications. The Huxley merger is critical to Pinnacle's success, and we need a clear path forward. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I didn't let it show. I had been preparing for this moment, knowing that the board would try to balance the personal with the professional. They would be trying to protect the company, but they also had to make sure they didn't lose face, and Ryan was a part of that equation. "What are the next steps?" I asked, my voice controlled, but firm. "We can't afford any more distractions. We need to move forward with the merger, and we need leadership that can focus on the company's goals. I'm more than capable of handling this, as I have done for the last 5 years." Walter looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly as if weighing my words. I knew he was calculating the potential fallout, considering how much they could lose if they sided with me and how much they could lose if they didn't. "The board is concerned about the future of the company," Walter said slowly, his gaze shifting to Ryan. "We have to make a decision about leadership, and we need to ensure that the firm's reputation remains intact. Mr. Holt, I must ask, can you continue to contribute to the firm with everything that's happening right now?" Ryan finally spoke, his voice low and strained. "I can still do my job. I've worked for this company for years. I built it. I'm not going to let this personal matter interfere with my professional responsibilities." But I could see the doubt in his eyes. He was grasping at straws, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The facade had cracked. The board saw him for what he was, and the damage was irreparable. His words fell flat in the room, and I could see the board members exchange uneasy glances. I knew this was my moment. This was the time to seal the deal, to show them that I was the one they could trust, not Ryan. "I've been with this company from the beginning," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "I've built relationships, secured clients, and managed the biggest deals. I've been the backbone of this firm, and I am the one who can ensure its future. I'm ready to lead, but Ryan—" I glanced briefly at him, my gaze hardening. "He's already proven he can't separate his personal life from his work. His actions have jeopardized not only his own career, but also the reputation of Pinnacle. I won't let that continue." The room was still. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped, like everyone was holding their breath. I could see the wheels turning in the minds of the board members. They were weighing their options, considering the impact of their decision. Ryan was still sitting there, silent, his face a mask of disbelief. He hadn't expected me to fight back like this. And then the words came. Walter looked around the table, nodding to the others. "The board has made its decision," he said, his voice heavy with finality. "Mr. Holt, you are suspended from your position as co-CEO pending further investigation. Ms. Holt will assume full control of the company moving forward, effective immediately." The weight of the decision settled over me like a fog lifting, both suffocating and freeing. As I sat there in the boardroom, the murmurs of agreement and quiet resignations from the members of the board felt almost distant, as if they were happening in another room entirely. I could hear the words, but it was as though they were no longer tied to the chaos I had endured. They had made their choice, and now it was mine to live with. Ryan sat there, motionless. His face, once full of confidence and command, now appeared drained, as if he were a man slowly realizing he had been stripped of everything he thought was his. The life he had worked so hard to build, the power he had amassed, was slipping from his fingers. He had tried to control me, to control the company, but in the end, it had all unraveled because of his own actions. But I didn't feel triumph. Not the kind I had imagined when I first discovered the truth. There was no satisfaction in seeing Ryan defeated, no joy in watching him lose everything. The man I had married, who had once promised to build a future with me, was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. What was left was nothing more than the ruins of a life we had once shared. I stood up, my heart still steady, my body moving with purpose as I turned toward the door. There was no need to look back. I didn't need to see Ryan's face again, didn't need to hear his attempts at justification. I had already made my decision, and now the future was mine to shape. The office was quieter now, emptier. I could hear the faint buzz of conversation behind me as I walked down the hall. I passed by my old office, the one Ryan and I had shared for so long. It seemed so far removed from everything I had just gone through, and yet it felt like it belonged to someone else. I stepped into my new office, the door closing, softly behind me. The walls were lined with glass, offering a breathtaking view of the city below. But it wasn't the view that held my attention. It was the space before me, the clean slate of my new beginning. The desk, the chairs, the open windows. It was all mine now. The weight of the decision from the board was still fresh, still settling within me, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something else, a quiet sense of peace. I placed my hands on the desk, my fingers grazing the smooth wood. The room was mine to fill, mine to define, and for the first time in a long time, I could see a future that was no longer dictated by Ryan, by our marriage, or by the lies we had told each other. My phone buzzed once more, the familiar name of Marcus Hendricks flashing on the screen. I picked it up, my voice steady as I greeted him. "Marcus, hello." "Emma," he said warmly. "I heard the news. I just wanted to let you know I'm behind you 100%. You've got this, and we'll continue working together. Pinnacle is in good hands." A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth as I listened to him. For the first time, I felt the weight of his words. I wasn't alone. I wasn't weak, and I didn't have to fight this battle on my own. There were people who believed in me, people who saw what I could do. I looked out the window at the city skyline, the sun beginning to set on a new day. The future wasn't clear yet, but it was mine to decide. I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. "Thank you, Marcus," I said softly. "I won't let you down." I hung up and placed the phone back on my desk. The silence in the room now felt like an invitation. It was the silence of opportunity, the silence of a new chapter. The next few months would bring challenges. There were no guarantees in the acai corporate world, and I would have to work harder than ever to prove my worth. But I wasn't afraid. I had faced the worst, and now I could rise from it, stronger than before. The office was my kingdom now. My decisions would shape it. And as I looked at the empty chair across from me, I felt a sudden clarity. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was building something that was mine, something real. And as I sat at my desk, the weight of everything I had endured seemed to lift, replaced by the quiet thrill of possibility. Whatever came next, I would face it with my head held high, my heart steady. This was my future, my time, and I would make it count.